There are moments in life when everything seems to align with a precision that defies logic. You pick up your phone at exactly the right second. You stumble upon a message that speaks directly to the questions you've been carrying in silence. You find yourself here reading these words, and something inside you whispers that this was meant to happen. But was it really? Or is your mind simply searching for patterns in the chaos, desperate to believe that your existence holds meaning beyond the mechanical march of cause and effect? Ibn Arabi, the great Sufi mystic, understood something that modern civilization has forgotten in its rush towards certainty and control. He knew that the universe operates through a language far more subtle than the one we speak with our tongues. It's a language of synchronicities, of invisible threads connecting souls across time and space, of moments that feel charged with an otherworldly significance. When he suggested that nothing happens by coincidence, he wasn't offering comfort. He was issuing a challenge. He was asking you to wake up to the possibility that your life is not a random sequence of accidents, but a carefully orchestrated journey towards something you don't yet understand. But here's where it gets uncomfortable. If your soul led you here, what does that say about all the other moments you dismissed as meaningless? What about the conversation you avoided last Tuesday? The book you almost bought but left on the shelf? The stranger whose eyes met yours for a fraction of a second before you both looked away? Were those coincidences too, or were they invitations you chose to ignore? The truth is, we live in a world that has trained us to distrust the subtle movements of the soul. We've been taught to value only what can be measured, quantified, and explained through rational frameworks. Intuition has been relegated to the realm of superstition. The idea that your soul might be guiding you towards specific experiences, people, and revelations is dismissed as wishful thinking by a mind that cannot accept its own insignificance in the face of something larger. And yet, here you are, still reading. Still feeling that inexplicable pull that tells you these words matter, even if you can't articulate why. The ancient mystics understood what neuroscience is only beginning to rediscover, that consciousness is not confined to the boundaries of your skull. Your awareness extends beyond your physical body, touching and being touched by forces that exist in dimensions your five senses were never designed to perceive. When Ibn Arabi spoke of the soul leading you somewhere, he wasn't speaking metaphorically. He was describing a literal navigation system that operates on frequencies your rational mind cannot detect. Your soul knows things your ego will spend years trying to figure out. It recognizes patterns before your conscious mind has even registered the data. It draws you towards certain experiences, not because they will make you happy, but because they will make you whole. But wholeness is not what we've been promised, is it? We've been sold the idea that life should be comfortable, predictable, safe. We've been told that if we follow the right formula, check the right boxes, accumulate the right credentials, we'll arrive at a destination called fulfillment. And when we get there, supposedly, the restlessness will stop, the questions will quiet, the gnawing sense that something is missing will finally dissolve. Except it doesn't work that way. Because the soul isn't interested in your comfort. It's interested in your evolution. And evolution requires friction, discomfort, the dismantling of everything you thought you knew about yourself. This is why synchronicities often arrive during periods of crisis. When your carefully constructed identity begins to crumble, when the relationship you built your entire sense of self around ends, when the career you pursued for a decade suddenly feels hollow, when the beliefs you inherited from your parents no longer fit the person you're becoming. In these moments of dissolution, the boundaries between your conscious and unconscious mind become permeable. The protective barriers your ego erected to keep you safe begin to collapse. And through the cracks, something else starts to speak. Something that has been waiting, patient, and persistent for you to finally stop running long enough to listen. You feel it now, don't you? That slight quickening in your chest, that sense of recognition that comes not from your memory, but from some deeper place. The mystics called it the remembering. Not the accumulation of new information, but the recovery of ancient knowledge that was always yours. Your soul remembers what your mind has forgotten. It remembers the reason you chose this particular lifetime, this specific collection of challenges, this unique configuration of pain and possibility. And it's been trying to remind you through every synchronicity, every inexplicable feeling of déjà vu, Every moment when the veil between worlds grew thin enough for you to catch a glimpse of something beyond the ordinary. But here's the paradox that destroys most people. You cannot force synchronicity. You cannot manipulate your way into meaningful coincidence. The more desperately you search for signs, the more elusive they become. Because the ego, in its infinite cleverness, will hijack even your spiritual seeking and turn it into another project of control. It will convince you that if you just meditate enough, manifest enough, affirm enough, you can bend reality to your will, and in doing so you'll miss the entire point. Synchronicity is not about control, it's about surrender. It's about becoming so aligned with your deepest truth that the universe can finally reach you. Not because you're special, not because you've earned it, but because you've stopped resisting long enough for what was always meant to find you to finally arrive. Think about the last time something truly unexpected shifted the trajectory of your life. Not the promotion you worked for or the relationship you strategically pursued, but the thing that came from nowhere. The chance encounter that led to your most transformative friendship. The random article that contained the exact insight you needed. The breakdown that forced you to rebuild yourself from the foundation. In retrospect, can you honestly say those were accidents? Or do you sense, even if you can't prove it, that some invisible hand was guiding you through a curriculum designed specifically for your awakening? This is what Ibn Arabi meant when he spoke of the soul as a guide, not in some abstract poetic sense, but as a literal statement about the architecture of existence. Your soul is not separate from the cosmos. It's a holographic fragment containing the entire pattern. What you call intuition is actually your soul's ability to perceive the larger design that your limited perspective cannot see. When you feel drawn to something without logical reason, that's not irrationality. It's a higher form of intelligence operating through channels your culture has taught you to ignore. The question is not whether your soul is trying to lead you. The question is whether you're brave enough to follow. Because following the soul's guidance requires a kind of death. The death of who you thought you were, the death of the future you spent years planning, the death of the identity you constructed to win approval from people who were never meant to understand you. This is why most people prefer the illusion of coincidence. It's safer to believe that life is random than to accept that every experience has been conspiring to wake you up. Because if nothing means anything, you can't be held responsible for the ways you've betrayed yourself. You can't be blamed for ignoring the whispers that tried to redirect you before the pain became unbearable. You can stay asleep, and sleep feels so much easier than the excruciating vulnerability of being awake. But you're not most people, are you? Something in you refuses to accept the comfortable lies. Something keeps pulling you toward the edge of what you know, toward the questions that have no easy answers, toward the darkness that everyone else is running from. You feel it in the middle of the night when you wake up at 3 in the morning with a sense of urgency you can't name. You feel it when you're surrounded by people but utterly alone because no one is speaking the language your soul understands. You feel it now reading these words, recognizing yourself in a description of something you've never been able to articulate. This is the beginning of the remembering. Not all at once, because that would shatter you, but slowly, in fragments and flashes, through dreams that feel more real than waking life, through art that moves you in ways you can't explain, through moments of beauty so piercing they bring you to tears for reasons that have nothing to do with sadness. These are not random emotional reactions. They are your soul trying to show you that there's more to existence than the narrow bandwidth of reality your culture has declared valid. They are evidence that you are more than your resume, your social media presence, your bank account, your relationship status. You are a mystery, and mysteries cannot be solved. They can only be lived. The modern world wants to reduce you to data points. It wants to predict your behavior, categorize your desires, monetize your attention. It needs you to be predictable because predictability is profitable. But your soul is allergic to predictability. It will sabotage every plan that tries to trap you in a life too small for what you came here to become. It will create crises when you get too comfortable in patterns that are killing you slowly. It will burn down the structures you built on foundations of fear and people-pleasing and inherited obligations. And when you're standing in the ashes wondering what went wrong, it will whisper, "Now we can begin." This is the initiation that no one prepares you for. The one that doesn't come with a certificate or a ceremony or external validation. It comes in the dark, when you're alone, when every strategy has failed and every door has closed. It comes when you finally stop asking, "Why is this happening to me?" and start asking, "What is this trying to teach me?" That shift in question is everything. Because the first question keeps you trapped in victimhood. The second question opens a portal to meaning. And meaning is what the soul craves above all else. Not happiness, not success, not even love, though love is often the vehicle through which meaning arrives. Meaning is the food the soul lives on. It's what makes suffering bearable and joy profound. Ibn Arabi understood that the soul operates according to laws that differ from the laws governing material reality. In the physical world, cause precedes effect. In the realm of the soul, effect can precede cause. Future events can reach backward in time to arrange present circumstances. This is why you sometimes feel drawn to do something that makes no sense in the moment, only to discover months or years later that it was setting up exactly what needed to happen. The soul sees the whole pattern. It knows how the story ends. And it's been dropping breadcrumbs through your entire life, waiting for you to stop distracting yourself long enough to see the trail. But seeing the trail requires stillness, and stillness is the one thing modern life is designed to prevent. You're kept perpetually busy, perpetually stimulated, perpetually anxious about the future, or regretful about the past. Anything to keep you from dropping into the present moment where the soul actually lives. Because in the present moment, without the noise of constant doing, you might actually hear what you've been running from. You might feel the grief you've been postponing. You might face the questions you've been avoiding. You might realize that the life you're living is not actually yours, but a performance for an audience that isn't even paying attention. This realization is both devastating and liberating. Devastating because it means everything you've been working toward might be based on lies. Liberating because it means you can stop. You can stop pretending. You can stop performing. You can stop contorting yourself into shapes that please others while suffocating your essence. You can start listening to the quiet voice that has been speaking beneath the chaos all along. The voice that knows what you need, even when what you need is the opposite of what you want. The voice that will guide you toward experiences that break you open, not to destroy you, but to free what's been imprisoned inside. And here's what no one tells you about following the soul's guidance. It gets harder before it gets easier. Because the soul doesn't care about your timeline or your preferences. It cares about your alignment with truth. So it will strip away every false identity, every toxic relationship, every situation that requires you to diminish yourself. It will put you through a purification process that feels like being burned alive from the inside out. And during this process, every synchronicity will feel like a test. Every sign will feel ambiguous. Every step forward will be accompanied by doubt so intense, you'll question whether you've lost your mind. This is the dark night of the soul that the mystics wrote about, the period when even the guidance goes silent, when you're left alone in the void with nothing but your faith in a process you cannot see or understand. This is when most people turn back. They decide it was all delusion. They return to the familiar, the safe, the soul-crushing but predictable life they were trying to escape. And there's no judgment in that choice. The path of soul-led living is not for everyone. It requires a level of trust that borders on insanity from the perspective of rational thought. It requires you to value inner knowing over external validation. It requires you to be willing to lose everything in service of something you cannot name. But if you make it through the dark night, something extraordinary happens. The synchronicities return, but now they're different. They're not just curious coincidences anymore. They're confirmation of a relationship you've established with life itself. They're evidence that you're in conversation with forces that were always trying to reach you, but couldn't get through the interference of your ego. You start to notice patterns, themes recurring across different areas of your life, numbers that follow you, songs that appear at exactly the moment you need to hear their message, people who show up carrying pieces of your puzzle. And you realize, this has been happening all along, you were just too distracted to see it. This is when you understand what Ibn Arabi really meant. Your soul didn't lead you here by accident. It led you here because you're ready. Not ready for comfort or certainty or answers that tie everything up neatly, but ready for the truth. Ready to stop living on the surface and start diving into the depths. Ready to stop asking permission to be who you actually are. ready to stop waiting for someone else to validate your experience of reality, ready to trust that the longing you've been carrying is not a sign of brokenness, but a compass pointing toward your purpose. And your purpose is not what you think it is. It's not a job title or a mission statement or a singular achievement. Your purpose is to become fully yourself, to strip away every layer of conditioning until you reach the irreducible essence of who you are. To live from that place of authenticity so completely that your mere presence becomes a permission slip for others to do the same. This is the gift you came here to give. Not your productivity or your perfection, your humanity, your willingness to be vulnerable, your courage to keep choosing truth even when lies would be easier. But this level of authenticity is terrifying, because it means you can no longer hide. You can no longer blame your parents or your trauma or your circumstances for why you're not living the life your soul is calling you toward. You have to take responsibility for your choices, all of them, the ones that brought you here and the ones that will take you forward. You have to acknowledge that on some level, beyond your conscious awareness, you chose this. You chose this body, this family, this collection of challenges. Not because you're being punished, but because your soul knew these were the exact conditions required for your particular evolution. This is where the Western mind usually rebels. We've been trained to believe we're victims of random genetics and environmental circumstances. The idea that we might have chosen our challenges feels absurd, even offensive. But the mystics from every tradition have said the same thing. The soul has agency beyond the personality. It operates from a vantage point that sees multiple lifetimes, infinite possibilities, the intricate web of karma and purpose. From that perspective, what looks like suffering from down here looks like education from up there. What feels like punishment is actually initiation. What seems like bad luck is actually the exact friction required to wear away the false self and reveal the diamond underneath. So when you feel that pull towards something that makes no logical sense, pay attention. When you experience a synchronicity that sends shivers down your spine, don't dismiss it. When you find yourself reading words that seem to know you better than you know yourself, recognize it for what it is. A message from the part of you that never forgot who you really are. A reminder that you're not lost, you're not broken, you're not behind schedule. You're exactly where you need to be, learning exactly what you came here to learn, becoming exactly who you were always meant to become. And the becoming never ends. This is not a journey toward a fixed destination. It's an endless unfolding of deeper and deeper layers of truth. Just when you think you've figured it out, another door opens, another mystery reveals itself. Another invitation arrives to go further than you thought possible. This is the nature of soul-led living. It's not comfortable, it's not safe, it's not reasonable, but it's real in a way that nothing else is. It's alive. And being alive means being in constant dialogue with the unknown, dancing on the edge between who you've been and who you're becoming, trusting that the ground will appear beneath your feet even when you can't see it. The question now is, what will you do with this knowing? Will you close this page and return to the comfortable numbness of distraction? Will you dismiss what you felt while reading as emotional manipulation or clever writing? Or will you let it land in the place inside you that recognizes truth when it hears it? Will you allow yourself to consider, even for a moment, that your soul has been orchestrating your entire life to bring you to this exact point of awareness? That every pain, every joy, every seeming detour has been part of a larger design you're only now beginning to perceive. Because here's the final truth that Ibn Arabi understood and tried to communicate through his mystical poetry. You are not separate from the divine intelligence that animates the cosmos. You are an expression of it. Your soul is not some external entity dragging you around. It's the deepest part of you, the part that never forgot its connection to Source. When you follow its guidance, you're not submitting to something outside yourself. You're aligning with your own true nature. You're coming home to who you've always been, beneath the layers of fear and conditioning and culturally imposed identity. And coming home is not a peaceful process. It's a return to yourself that requires you to confront everything you've been running from, every shadow you've projected, every wound you've avoided, every truth you've been too afraid to speak. Your soul will lead you directly into the center of what you most need to face. not to punish you but to free you, because on the other side of that confrontation is a version of you that's no longer controlled by unconscious patterns. A version of you that can choose freely instead of reacting automatically. A version of you that can love without needing anything in return. A version of you that can create without attachment to outcome. A version of you that can be present in the mystery without needing to solve it. This is the invitation, not to understand everything, but to trust the intelligence that brought you here, to follow the subtle guidance that speaks in feelings rather than words, to honor the synchronicities as the love letters they are, to stop demanding proof and start experimenting with faith, not blind faith in religious dogma, but earned faith through direct experience. Faith that builds every time you follow an intuitive hit and it leads somewhere meaningful. Faith that deepens every time you honor a boundary and the right people stay. Faith that strengthens every time you choose truth over convenience and discover that the universe supports those who support themselves. Your soul led you here because you're capable of hearing what these words are really saying. Not everyone is. Most people will read this and feel nothing or feel threatened or feel the need to debunk and dismiss. But you're different. You're one of the ones who came here to wake up fully, to stop sleepwalking through a life designed by others, to claim your sovereignty, to live from the soul rather than from the ego, and that work, that sacred work of becoming conscious, requires you to see the patterns, to recognize the synchronicities, to understand that nothing, absolutely nothing, happens by accident. So the question is not whether your soul led you here. It did. The question is, now that you know, what will you do? Will you honor the calling? Will you follow the thread? Will you trust that if you take one step toward your truth, the universe will take 10 steps toward you? Or will you choose the familiar prison over the unknown freedom? Because both are choices. Ignoring the call is still a choice. Pretending you didn't feel anything is still a choice. Going back to sleep is still a choice. But so is waking up. So is saying yes to the journey even when you can't see where it leads. So is trusting the intelligence of your soul over the fear of your ego. So is believing that you are held by forces far more powerful and loving than your rational mind can comprehend. And once you make that choice, truly make it from the depths of your being, everything changes. Not overnight, not magically, but incrementally, synchronistically, mysteriously. Doors open, people appear, resources materialize, the path reveals itself one step at a time, and you realize that you were never alone. You were never lost. You were always being guided. You just needed to become still enough, present enough, brave enough to feel the hand that's been reaching for yours all along. This is what Ibn Arabi knew. This is what he tried to teach. And this is what your soul is trying to remind you right now in this moment. Through these words, you are not an accident. Your life is not random. And if you're reading this, it's because some part of you is ready to remember, ready to wake up, ready to step into the life that's been waiting for you to finally claim it. The life that's been calling you through every synchronicity, every intuitive hit, every unexplainable feeling that there's more to this existence than what you've been told. So take a breath, feel the truth of what's moving through you, and know that this moment right now is sacred, because it's the moment you stopped resisting what your soul has been trying to tell you all along. It's the moment you chose to trust the mystery instead of demanding certainty. It's the moment you decided that the risk of following your deepest knowing is preferable to the safety of staying small. And that choice, that single choice to honor the call, changes everything. Not just for you, but for everyone whose life will be touched by the full expression of who you came here to be. There's something else you need to understand about this journey. The path of the soul is not linear. It doesn't follow the logic of progress that society has programmed into you. You won't wake up one day and suddenly have it all figured out. You won't reach a point where doubt disappears forever and certainty becomes your permanent state. The soul's curriculum involves cycles of expansion and contraction, revelation and confusion, clarity and fog. Just when you think you've integrated a profound insight, life will present you with a situation that makes you question everything you thought you knew. This is not failure, this is the design. The soul teaches through spirals, not straight lines. You'll return to the same lessons again and again, but each time from a different vantage point, with more depth, with greater capacity to hold the truth. What seemed like regression is actually integration happening at a cellular level. The patterns you thought you'd healed will resurface, not because you failed to heal them the first time, but because you're now ready to heal them at a deeper layer. This is how transformation actually works. Not through one dramatic breakthrough, but through countless small deaths and rebirths that eventually accumulate into a life you barely recognize. And during those moments when you feel like you're moving backward, when the old patterns re-emerge with a vengeance, when you catch yourself falling into behaviors you swore you'd transcended, remember this: your soul is not disappointed in you. It doesn't measure your worth by your productivity or your ability to maintain constant spiritual composure. The soul is patient. It understands that becoming fully human requires you to fail, to stumble, to fall flat on your face and get back up covered in mud. These moments of apparent failure are actually moments of profound integration. They're opportunities to practice self-compassion instead of self-judgment. They're invitations to see that you are worthy of love, not despite your imperfections, but because of your willingness to keep showing up even when it's hard. This is where most spiritual teachings fail you. They promise transcendence, escape from the messiness of being human. They offer techniques to rise above your emotions, to bypass your trauma, to manifest your way out of discomfort. But the soul's path is not about transcendence, it's about embodiment. It's about bringing consciousness into every corner of your human experience, including the parts you've been taught to reject. The soul wants you to feel everything fully, to stop numbing, avoiding, and spiritually bypassing, to be present in your anger, your grief, your desire, your fear. Because these emotions are not obstacles to your awakening, they are the doorways through which awakening happens. Ibn Arabi spoke of the perfect human as one who has integrated all opposites within themselves, not someone who has eliminated their shadow, but someone who has made peace with it. Not someone who lives in perpetual bliss, but someone who can hold both joy and sorrow with equal grace. This is the maturity the soul is calling you toward, not perfection, but wholeness, not transcendence, but full-spectrum aliveness. And that kind of aliveness is terrifying, because it means you can't protect yourself anymore. You can't hide behind spiritual concepts or positive thinking, or the illusion that you're somehow above the human experience. The soul will strip away every defense mechanism until you're standing naked in the truth of who you actually are. And who you actually are is so much more vast and complex and beautiful than the small self you've been defending. You are not just light, you are also darkness. You are not just love, you are also rage. You are not just wisdom, you are also confusion. And the integration of these polarities within yourself is what makes you capable of true compassion. Because once you've met and accepted your own darkness, you can finally stop projecting it onto others. Once you've felt your own capacity for destruction, you can hold space for others without judgment. Once you've faced your own madness, you can recognize the sanity in what the world calls insane. This is the gift that comes from following your soul's guidance all the way to the end. Not enlightenment in some abstract, otherworldly sense, but a grounded, embodied humanity that can hold the full spectrum of existence without breaking. A nervous system that can tolerate intensity without shutting down. A heart that can remain open even when it's being shattered. A mind that can embrace paradox without needing to resolve it into neat categories. This is what it means to be fully alive. And being fully alive is what your soul has been preparing you for through every synchronicity, every challenge, every moment of grace that brought you to this point. So when you ask yourself whether it's really possible that your soul led you here, consider what would be required for that to be true. It would mean that you are part of an intelligence so vast and intricate that your human mind could never fully comprehend it. It would mean that your life has meaning beyond what you can measure or prove. It would mean that you are loved by forces that existed before you were born and will continue after you die. It would mean that nothing you've experienced has been wasted, that every moment of suffering contained a seed of wisdom, that every relationship taught you something essential about yourself. Can you live with that possibility? Can you allow yourself to believe that you matter that much? Because this is often the hardest part. not believing that the universe is intelligent, but believing that you are significant enough for that intelligence to care about your individual journey. The ego either inflates itself into grandiosity or deflates into worthlessness, but the soul knows a different truth. It knows that you are both infinitely significant and cosmically insignificant. You are a unique expression of the divine that will never be repeated, and you are also a tiny wave in an ocean, so vast you cannot see its shores. Both are true. And living with that paradox is what it means to walk the soul's path. Welcome home. Your soul has been waiting. And now that you've arrived, the real work begins. Not the work of striving or achieving or becoming something other than what you are, but the work of remembering, of shedding, of allowing, of trusting, of surrendering to the intelligence that brought you here and knows exactly where you need to go next. The path will not be easy, but it will be real. And after a lifetime of living in illusion, reality is the only thing that will finally satisfy the hunger you've been carrying all along.